Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing fanta6 in the 15-minute pool on ICC. fanta6 is a player I played recently in a game, and we had a Tarash in that game. I believe that was the game I played the Tarash. So I'm going to play something different this time. I'm actually going to go with Nimzo Complex. And here, black has a wide choice. So bishop b4 check, d5, c5, and b6, the Queen's Indian. So b6, the Queen's Indian, I believe, is the most popular in this position. I have no experience with it. Bishop b4 check, the Bogo-Indian, I also have no experience with it from the black side. So just debating how I want to play this. I could also try to get it into a Benoni, which would be very interesting with c5. I'm not going to play d5. I don't want a Queen's Gambit. Declined. This is a tough call. Let's play the Queen's Indian. Perhaps the most solid of all these lines. The Bogo-Indian and Queen's Indian are both extremely respectable openings. Can't go wrong with either one. And he plays the so-called Kasparov variation with a3. Now, bishop b7 is the standard way of playing this, but there's also bishop a6. I kind of feel like playing bishop a6. I'll do that. It's a little more active than bishop b7. It attacks this c4 pawn. And if they go queen c2, I can strike with c5, is the thing. So let's see how he responds. And if they play knight bd2, then the natural flow of their development has been disturbed, because this knight would love to go to c3 instead of d2. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. I don't have any huge plans this weekend. I'm not playing any tournaments. Just kind of taking it easy. It's getting a little warmer here in Minnesota, so I hope to be outdoors and active. There's a really nice and large regional park close to where I live with great hiking and stuff. And I think I might go over there. And I was over there earlier this week, actually. Great place to de-stress and just hike around. b3 would be an inconsistent move with his setup. I mean, b3, a3 doesn't make a great impression. So queen c2 is for sure the main move here. And I'm trying to remember if black plays c5 right away or if they actually play bishop b7 and then c5. That very well could be the case too. Because if I play queen c2, c5 right away, arguably white could play e4 because the queen defends that square. And the nuance bishop a6 and immediately back to b7 is not at all uncommon in this opening. That happens quite a bit. And the argument is that white's queen is better off on d1 compared to c2. But we'll see. He's going into the tank right here. Just checking this player. Yeah, I'm fairly certain this is the guy that I got into a Tarash defense with. I was black also the last time we played. And what I remember about that game, well, I remember a lot about that game, but he made a somewhat dubious decision later on in the game. And there was some element of time pressure for both sides, and this position kind of collapsed. b3. So as I said, this move is, I think, a little dubious. It looks strange. I mean, the pawns here and here. I would say I have a number of good moves. c5 and d5 both come to mind right away. I could again bring the bishop back to b7 if I wanted. b5 is also possible. But I'm pretty sure I'll decide on one of c5 or d5. c5 is appealing because after d5, if he were to go for a Benoni type position, I think that pawn is not so well placed on b3. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do c5. Attack him in the center. I think d5 would have been perfectly good too. So if he advances, I will capture, and then I'll most likely play g6, looking to fianchetto. And it's nice because if he ever plays e3, we can trade the bishops and I will destroy his right to castle. I will take away his right to castle by capturing on f1. Okay, so he's going to fianchetto. Now at this point, I am looking at taking on d4 or playing bishop b7 right away. Slight preference for taking on d4 immediately, because if knight takes, then I get to go bishop b7. If bishop b7 right away, and then bishop g2 then takes, then he wouldn't be able to take with the knight at all. Let's take immediately. And if he takes with the queen, naturally I can gain a tempo with knight c6. So I believe his plan is after bishop b7, he's going to play the knight back to f3. That's what he's up to. My bishop has run its course on the f1 a6 diagonal anyways, so there's no reason to keep it around there. So we'll just go back. And after knight f3, I could break in the center with d5 immediately. I bet that equalizes by brute force. I could also adopt a more hedgehog formation if I wanted. Put the pawn on d6, or just play bishop e7, bishop g2, castle, and proceed from there. I have many attractive options. So if I play d5 immediately and he takes, yeah, I could take with the queen and be fine. Taking with the knight would probably be okay too. Might have e4 though. Bishop e7, bishop g2, castle, castle, then d5 perhaps. Yeah, let's postpone the decision as to the center for now. Taking on f3, even though it doubled his pawns, it gives up my light square bishops. I didn't really like that. So let's just do this. I'm certain he will castle. So now, how to play. I can develop this knight through a6 as well. That might be interesting. En route to c5. I don't want to play knight c6, despite it looking very obvious, and it's probably fine. It's just, I don't want to block this light square bishop. Knight a6, on the other hand, I'm starting to like the look of this move. Knight a6, let's say bishop b2, knight c5. Maybe he can play b4, however. Let's go d5. The most direct move. We no longer have to worry about a backward pawn, a potential backward pawn on the d file. And now I was thinking take with the knight. Because if I take with the bishop, knight c3 is possible. So I like taking with the knight. Bishop f6 I can play around with. So if I want to do bishop f6, you'd probably play queen c2. Maybe knight c6 then. Yeah, let's do bishop f6. Neutralize the dark square bishop. The pawn structure is nearly symmetrical. And at first sight, there doesn't seem to be much of anything to indicate that one side would have an advantage over the other. But I think there could be some micro problems in his position. For instance, the c3 square is tender. If after bishop takes, now I'm going to take with the queen more than likely. If after this he were to play knight bd2 to guard the rook on a1, then knight c3 could be a problem. I get the feeling if I play queen takes f6, he plans on queen d4, trying to enforce a trade. Which is fine by me. I mean, I could play knight c6 or knight d7 then. If I take with my knight, that's nothing special, so let's take with the queen. I like the challenge of trying to outplay someone from a nearly equal position, too. So this may be instructive if he plays queen d4 and the queens do indeed get traded. I don't have to trade the queens either. I could play a move like queen e7, try to keep them on board. I'm also very tempted to go knight c6, queen takes f6, and then g takes f6, which is not a half bad structure. That solves my back rank issue. Hard to even call it a back rank issue right now, but in the future I wouldn't have to worry about a back rank. Checkmate. If I withdraw the queen, I mean, I only gain one tempo later with knight c6. I don't know that that's enough to disturb him. So I'd love to continue developing rapidly, and that's why I like knight c6. And after taking with a pawn, if I were to take with a knight, he might have knight e5, trying to use the pin on my bishop. So hence my slight preference for g takes f6. I will play that. Let's pre-move this move. He must trade queens. If he moves his queen, I win the rook in the corner. So after the queen trade, I kind of get the sense that he'll play e4, because if he plays knight bd2, I might have knight c3. Attacking e2 looks like it could be unpleasant for him. So I think he'll play e4, and I'll drop my knight back to e7. He can play knight c3 then, but I feel like with the diagonal blocked, I have a nice position to work with. Also, that pawn being on b3 rather than b2 means that if I ever put a rook on c8 with his knight on c3, he'll have to worry about discovered attacks. So he may need to assign one of his rooks to the c file, and maybe I can go attack the b3 pawn later with a move like knight a5. So there's all these things that I perceive to be micro advantages that I hope will work in my favor in this endgame. All of this might add up to only like a quarter pawn advantage or something. I don't think my advantage, if it's anything, if it even registers with the computer, will be more than a half pawn. It's probably closer to a tenth to a quarter pawn, but I like the look of this position. Okay, so I'll go knight e7 as planned. Knight c7, I didn't want my knight stacked on the c file, and I'd like to keep the c file free so I can play rook c8. And the double pawns, by the way, it's not a big problem. There's not enough going on the king side, nor can he attack these double pawns to make it an issue. In fact, it kind of helps me because it enhances my center control. I can move this knight away and not have to worry about knight e5. Moreover, I like the fact that this pawn on e4 blocks his bishop. That's a nice side benefit. Okay, so I'm thinking rook a c8. He'll probably play rook c1, one of the rooks to c1, and then maybe knight a5. If rook c8, knight b5, there's bishop a6. So let's do that. I'm kind of wondering about rook c1, knight a5, knight b5, counterattacking my a pawn, and trying to get into d6 as well. Okay, he immediately played that move. Now, d6 is weak, there's no doubt about that, but bishop a6 is a possibility. He'd have to play a4 then. It's a little ugly. I mean, he gets double pawns, but maybe it's not the end of the world for him. Bishop a6, a4. Let's say knight a5. If he were to take on a7, I have rook a8 then. So no problem there. Also, I have knight a5 in this position, which attacks b3 and also e4. I wonder what that does. So if knight a5, he can go b4 if he wants. Knight c4, knight takes a7. It's getting a little complex. I could also simply play rook fd8 in this position, but he'll go rook fd1 probably. Gets out of potential pin. So bishop a6, a4, knight a5 is what I'm thinking right now. b4 though. Gotta watch my time a little bit. What about knight a5, or knight a5, knight takes a7, rook c3 also. b4, a b4 move is always irritating. Knight a5. b4 right away. And I can get into c4. And if he takes, I have rook a8. Knight b5, bishop takes e4 at the very least. Okay, let's do this. What about knight d6, though, if he does that? Knight a5, knight d6. That is his main threat, actually. Yeah, I better not risk it. I'm just going to play this move. And after a4, I might not take the knight. I might play rook fd8. And then if he brings a rook to the d1 square, I'm thinking swap the rooks, swap on b5, and maybe play knight a5 then. Let's just do that. I don't want to take this knight quite yet. We'll just bring our pieces to good posts. I'm curious where he'll put this rook, because I think he's likely to move this rook. Just in view of the pin going on. Rook fc1 might be a useful move, though, is the only thing. I'm still very solid. Yeah, I bet he's deciding between a move like rook fd1 or rook fc1. At least that's what I would be looking at if I were white. It's likely I spent a little too long on bishop a6, but I felt like this was an important position. Okay, rook fc1 he decides on. That seems like a more sophisticated choice. Yeah, he's trying to avoid a trade so that this rook can remain on its current file. Let's go here. Just guarding a7. Maybe I can double up on the d file. Bishop f1 is plausible. But if bishop f1 and I double, he's not threatening anything, because if knight takes a7, I can take with my rook, guarding the bishop on a6 against his bishop takes a6 threat. So the reason I'd like to double the rooks is so I can move this knight. Let's say knight b4 or knight a5. Knight a5 would be nice because that attacks b3, and if he were to move b4, then I have knight b3. But knight b4 is also an attractive square because the knight cannot be harassed by a pawn on that square. This is the Saudi Arabian flag. I remember that from playing him. I think I guessed Tunisia, which is kind of a ridiculous guess. I don't know why I guessed that. I'm still anticipating bishop f1. I still think he'll play this move. It's useful. His bishop is doing nothing on g2. And now that the rook has vacated that square, it's natural to try to improve the bishop's prospects. So I'm thinking bishop f1, rook cd7. He might want to think about a move like rook c3, but I'm not sure he wants to allow me to play rook d1 in the future. So I expect to win a little time back. I am winning some time back because there's things to consider for him. It's no longer obvious what he should do. Like a4 was an absolutely forced move, which is annoying because I had to spend time on bishop a6, knowing that he has to play a4. Wow, so he changes his mind now and he does that. Okay, so I can go to that line I was talking about earlier. Take, take, bishop takes, pawn takes, knight a5, something to that effect, but do I really want to do that? Now I feel like I should just double. Yeah, let's just double. Let's keep this simple. Pre-move the capture. Wonder what he was concerned about. He must have got cold feet about allowing me to utilize the D file. Something said, don't let that happen. I still hope to attack this b3 pawn. He does play bishop f1, as planned. Okay, so knight b4, rook c1 maybe. Knight a5, b4 is plausible. What about knight b4, rook c1, knight ec6? Maybe. Okay, let's send this knight in first of all, and then decide. He's not threatening much after rook c1. I mean, maybe he's eyeing the c7 square, that's it. A line I'm not necessarily thrilled about is rook c1, knight ec6, rook c4. That could get weird. Because then this, like, neither of my knights can move. But then again, I have rook d1 maybe. And go after the b3 pawn. That would be a strange position. I might go for that, actually. I still feel that his position presents more convenient targets than mine. I have a weak a7 pawn, but other than that, and a potentially weak bishop on a6 that's x-rayed by his bishop, but other than that, there's not much for him to go off of. Okay, so here I'm thinking this move. Let's do that. And if rook c4, I'll go rook d1, looking to play rook b1 and attack this pawn. I mean, rook c4 is awkward for him, too, because he puts himself in a pin. Can't move that knight from b5. h4, staking out space. Okay, so he's content to sit back and wait for a minute. Maybe I'll move my king to the center. What else? Knight a5. Knight a5 was one of my original intentions. Maybe king g7 first, though. Yeah, let's just do king g7 first. He's not able to stop knight a5 unless he wants to play the rook c4 move. But I pretty much decided at this point that rook c4 is nothing to lose sleep over. I think he's going to make a waiting move on the king side again. I think he might make a move like king g2. g4, yeah, something like that. This pawn is now undefended too. So knight a5. Knight a5, maybe he'll bring a knight into d4. But that's not so simple. Okay. We have to decide now. Moment of truth. We have 2.5 minutes left. He has 3.5. Probably knight bd4 is what he should do. Maybe I'll retain my bishop then. Bishop b7 and attack this pawn. If he were to play that. Yeah, that looks annoying. And then if he wants to defend it, he'll have to do something like rook e1. If he plays, on the contrary, knight fd4, then I can take on b5. He would have to take with his knight, and this pawn is loose. I don't know if I can take that pawn immediately. Probably not, because he has rook b1. But it will be loose. I maybe have a6 there. Time situation is equalizing. That loses a piece. Yeah, I can just take here now. Yeah, that was an ill-conceived move. I think he was only banking on rook takes c7, knight takes c7, which he would lose a pawn even in that line. Bishop takes f1, king takes f1, knight takes b3. Although he has knight e8 check at the end, maybe going after the f6 pawn, but this way he just immediately loses a piece, and he resigned. Okay, let's have a look at this from the beginning. So I played the Queen's Indian, b6. Theory says that g3 is the most critical try against the Queen's Indian, and I would tend to agree based on what I've seen. a3, though, is a dangerous move. I believe this move was popularized by Kasparov. I think it's even called the Kasparov variation. But the idea is to play knight c3 without allowing bishop b4. Because if white were to immediately play knight c3, then bishop b4 actually enters a hybrid variation that could arise from a Nimzo-Indian or a Queen's Indian, so, which is considered fine for black. So bishop a6, and yeah, queen c2 is the main move. And I couldn't recall if it was bishop b7 right away or c5, but black should play one of those moves. c5 makes a lot of sense when the queen is no longer guarding d4, so I probably would have played that move, but it might also be bishop b7 first, I'm not sure. Because if c5, I do wonder if e4 is possible, whereas bishop b7 rolls that move out for now. And he could play knight c3, though, to renew it. Nevertheless, he played b3. I really dislike that move. It just looks suspicious. His structure is not compromised yet, but having the pawns on b3 and a3 already create weaknesses on the queen side, specifically that c3 square. And he must have regretted that later to some degree. I think d5 or c5 is good in this position. Potentially even b5. But I chose c5. He went g3. I took. Knight takes, bishop back to b7. Knight f3. I have no intention of playing bishop takes f3. So just bishop e7, bishop g2, castle, castle. Let's add the engine now and see what it likes. I think d5 is a pretty easy, at least equalizing move. But, you know, I thought about other stuff like knight a6 too. Yeah, d5 is the computer's top recommendation. C takes. Okay, it thinks queen takes is good. Knight takes is also good. So let's try to unpack why black could possibly be better here. I mentioned it during the game, but many of you might look at this position. I mean, let's look at it from the white side too for a second. Let's just flip the board. Like, why is black better here? The position looks nearly symmetric. I mean, black is arguably one tempo ahead in development, but with white's next move, I think they played, what, bishop b2? They can solve that problem. But it really has to do with the pawn structure. And the fact that this pawn is on b3 rather than b2, I think that permanently weak c3 square is a concern. Now, my c6 square is also weak too, but I think having the fianchetto bishop to protect it, although he has a fianchetto bishop to protect it too, but maybe it's the fact that I'm ready to exchange his dark square bishop, whereas he has to work pretty hard to exchange my light square bishop. That might be why. I'm just trying to, like, when I look at this position, like, intuitively to me, I just know that c3 will be weak, but I know that a lot of you watching, that's not an obvious thing. Yeah, I mean, I would even go so far as to say that if the pawn is back on b2, the position is nothing to write home about. I'd still take black there just because of the knight on d5, but white would rather have the pawn back on b2 than b3, I think. You may disagree with that, but... So it's mainly that. It's that queenside weakness is the fact that I have a strong knight in the center that if he wants to get rid of it, he'll have to play a move that blocks the diagonal and blocks his light square bishop. So my position is more coherent than his, let's say. I think this is a good trade. If you want to conquer a weak square, it makes sense to trade the pieces that can guard that square. So now we have rid ourselves of the dark square bishop. All that being said, I mean, this is within the bounds of acceptability for him. He's not going to lose because of that weak c3 square, but it's a start. Okay, I see the engine really hates my idea of voluntarily accepting those pawns. It says, are you crazy? You should just take with the knight. Why ruin a perfectly good pawn structure? I don't know. I just thought like if I did this, he would have a move like that whenever he wants. There could be mass exchanges on c6. It's telling that even here, the computer slightly prefers black. Again, because of the weaknesses and white's a tempo behind. Somehow g takes f6. Just maybe I spend too much time playing the Scandinavian, where black often takes on this structure. But somehow this move appeals to me. Played e4. I'd retreat. This is the one unfortunate thing. Like now my knights are superfluous. They're stepping on each other's toes. That I would have preferred to go to a different square than e7, but c7 also doesn't look too great for me. I mean, I'm not really thrilled to play knight b5, unless I could bring it into d4 quickly or something. But computer likes knight c7 though over knight to e7, so it might be worth considering. Okay, so here knight a5 immediately might be better. Attacking that pawn, and if b4 I get this in, or rook f c8. Rook f c8. In between move to attack the knight. And if knight b5, knight c4, guarding d6, so no knight d6 to worry about, and bishop takes e4 as a threat. Translating to a small edge for black. So I played that. Yeah, rook a c8 might be an inaccuracy, because I used a lot of time now figuring out how to deal with knight b5. I think I was guilty of making an autopilot move with rook a c8. How long did I spend on this move? 30 seconds? It's a reasonable amount of time, but I think my thinking was a little too programmed. It's a natural move to make. In Bullet, I would have made this move instantly. I would have spent like 2 seconds on it. 1 second, if that. Just line up the rook with the undefended piece. Because we always want to be aware of our undefended pieces, right? Well, not so much e4, but c3 and b3 for sure. But it does allow knight b5, which carries with it the knight d6 threat. So if I could do this position over again, I probably would play knight a5, now that I look at it. This is more accurate. So rook a c8, and then I had to spend some uncomfortable minutes figuring out what to do. But like I said, I think this position is critical. I really do. The path the game takes could hinge on this decision. Whether to play bishop a6 or like rook f d8, or also knight a5 was another move I debated, ultimately rejected. Just seems suspicious, especially with b4 being a possibility. So let's see, bishop a6. Plays a4 because that's forced. Again, it likes knight a5, or at least now it likes knight a5. Gives white a small advantage, though. Yeah, it puts me to a difficult decision when I have the bishop on a6 and they have the strong knight on b5 supported by the pawn. Because it makes sense to eliminate that knight and saddle him with double isolated pawns, but that pressure on a7 yields immediate returns to white. And you can see he's just winning a pawn. Knight a5, b4, knight moves somewhere, rook takes a7, hitting this knight. I've lost a pawn. So that's why I tried to just cover d6 now, rook f d8. Yeah, and he apparently should have played the immediate rook f d1 as opposed to rook f c1 and then rook c d1 or rook d1 right after. And the engine says white's a little bit better. I was wondering about doing this and then taking on b5 and then moving my knight somewhere. Again, I think I was thinking about knight a5, but I think I see the drawback of that. After b4, this rook is ready to infiltrate d7. Let's say I go knight c4. And there's a double attack on the undefended points, e7 and a7. So maybe knight b8 to cover d7, but now I'm a little passive. He does have the double pawns, but these knights are crippled. Where do they even go? b4, and he can claim some edge. He can start slowly trying to exploit his space advantage. Yeah, so if there's one move I regret this game, I think it's that rook ac8 move. I don't even regret the decision to play g takes f6 so much, even though the computer was saying knight takes f6 is better. I think this was a good example of an autopilot move. As I've said before, rook moves to the center. Those are moves that are easy to justify because rooks belong in the center, especially in middle games. But very often they turn out to be mistakes. I see this in the games of my students all the time. They'll just play an autopilot move and boom, mistake. There's a game, if you search my standard archive on here, it was a Sicilian game where I was black, and I'll post the link if I can find it. But it was where my opponent played a very natural-looking move, rook he1, where rook he1 was like the move that fit his position. It looked like all his pieces were cooperating. It looked like a very harmonious move. Turned out to be a mistake. And I said in-game, I think that's an autopilot move. I think it's a mistake. So watch those rook moves to the center. Rook ac8, knight b5, bishop a6, a4. Fortunately, I worked my way out of this because he played that move. Rook d3. I didn't notice rook d3, attacking b3. Yeah, because c8 is guarded, so I don't have to worry about moves like knight takes a7 or anything. So I played rook d7. But now the position is fine for black, if not slightly better. A lot of it revolves around who gets control of the d-file, doesn't it? Because if he plays rook fd1 immediately, I don't have a good way to wrest control of the file away from him. He's disputing the d-file, so I can't play a move like rook d3 and get to attack b3 so easily. And if I try to initiate a double rook trade, that fails because he has knight takes a7 at the end. So there's the justification for it. Playing rook fd1. Yeah, that one tempo made a big difference. Now that he goes here and I'm ready to double, and I will take the file. Bishop f1 as expected. I went knight b4. Okay, that's probably alright. Knight b4. Knight c6. Okay, so the engine does mention rook c4, which makes everything awkward. His position and my position. Because like I said, I can't move my knights for fear of losing one of them. They're protecting each other now. But he can't move this knight. He's putting himself on a pin voluntarily. It's a very awkward move to make for him. So I understand that he didn't do it, but it's also putting my pieces in question too. So I would have played rook d1 though. King g2 or b1. Okay. Yeah, somehow we have rough equality after rook c3. Okay. But instead he played a waiting move h4. I went here. King g7 might be inaccurate. When I played it, I thought I might have something better, more direct, because king g7 does give him the option of rook c4. But I figured this move is helpful. Gets the king off the back rank, so no longer exposes us to any future rook c8, even though rook c8 is not possible with the bishop on a6. And also, I was banking on the fact that he's not going to change his mind and suddenly play rook c4. If he didn't play it the first time around, I think it's much less likely he will play it the second time. So, g4, yeah, that was a weakening move. I could tell he wanted to keep the status quo. I mean, you can kind of tell by his move h4, which is useful to some degree, but something about his timing and, I don't know, just the way I felt about the position, I could tell he wasn't sure how to proceed. So, g4, and now I went knight a5. This bishop e7 move the engine really likes, though. Probably because after I play a6, I can even then play knight a5, and the bishop may be attacking e4. So I did this immediately. Yeah, and that was just a one-move blunder. So the position is not so bad for him if he goes g5. Because if I take this pawn, rook b1 is an issue. My knights are lined up on the b file and undefended, and I can't defend the b3 knight. So I'm losing a piece. Yeah, I don't know how I would respond to this. I think I was speculating that maybe I'd move this bishop back. Although a7 could hang.
Check.
This requires some precise play by him now, though. Knight d6. Okay. So if I take the knight, then e5 check wins my rook. So he might have a path to get a playable position here, but I think black has the initiative now pretty firmly. If a move like rook c3, yeah, then bishop b7 again. Or rook d1. Rook d1 might be interesting too. Bishop e7, if he takes here, I take on e4. Knight back, knight d5, attacking his rook, which is in turn defending the knight. And his rook has nowhere to go that's safe. That will also defend the knight again. Yeah, and unfortunate for him. It would have been interesting to see how the game could proceed if he hadn't blundered rook c7. Okay, well, I think white's opening strategy was questionable, but he got an okay position. I hope I explained why I believe black is slightly better in the position after d5, how these small advantages can translate to being able to play for a win. But also for myself, I didn't play an error-free game. Watch those autopilot rook moves. Rook a c8 was not good. It looks like such a natural move. I know I would play that move in bullet probably 19 times out of 20. Maybe one of the times I would play knight a5 or a6 or something, but just knowing my own chess game, I would play rook a c8 probably again if I had this position. So I have to work harder to train myself out of moves like that, and you should too. Anyways, that was a fun game, and I hope you guys are enjoying your weekend. I'll be back tomorrow with another standard game. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.